I want to cover the basic 4 premises from this article, Framing Sustainability. I like what David Orr does in this article. So David Orr takes a number of lessons from Abraham Lincoln's 1858 address and applies them to how we should frame sustainability. So David Orr is a distinguished professor of environmental studies and politics at Oberlin College Emeritus. He's a well-known environmentalist and is active in many areas of environmental studies, including environmental education and ecological design. Yeah, that came from Wikipedia. But generally speaking, David Orr is actually from my perspective, is a really interesting writer on issues of sustainability and the environment. He's done a lot of really good writing, and if you want, you could look him up. So the 4 principles, the 4 takeaways from Lincoln's speech as David Orr sees them. Avoid unnecessary complication and contentiousness. The issues of sustainability are primarily ones of fairness and intergenerational rights. So he makes the point that they are not issues of technology or economics, as important as we might think that these things are. Lincoln regarded slavery as wrong because no human had the right to hold property in the form of another human being, period, not because it was economically inefficient. By a similar logic, according to David Orr, ours is in the principle that no human has the right to diminish the life and well-being of another, and no generation has the right to inflict harm on generations to come. So I think that there's a certain elegance to this kind of a strategy. I know if you're like me, I tend to overthink everything. So I come at everything from 50 billion angles, and I'm always thinking about, well, why does that argument not work? And what is this person going to think of this argument? And what is that person going to think of this argument? And why is this not fair to this group of people over here? That's how I approach things. And I recognize that there's a place for that, but also sometimes that overcomplicating of issues gets in the way of clear communication. Sustainability issues really aren't that complicated. We must adopt sustainable lifestyles. If we don't, then we will pay a terrible price, and the people around us and the next generations and the future generations and all of the other species on the planet will also pay a terrible price. So it really is truly that simple. And so I like how David Orr expresses that. So Lincoln built his case from familiar sources. In the case of Lincoln, it was the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bible. These sources were familiar to his audience. Again, we can take from that lesson. We can build our arguments on documents like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Earth Charter, various legal documents, documents that make sense for our particular audience. So what documents make sense for our particular audience? We might even expand this into who do we want to use as the messenger? The messenger, and I've talked to you a little bit about this before, the messenger can be vital as well. If we have a familiar, and especially if for some reason this messenger is respected, that can help to make our message more powerful too. Number 3. Lincoln's use of religion as instructive both for its depth and for its restraint. He used biblical imagery and language frequently, but did not do so to castigate Southerners or to inflate Northerners' pretensions. So we can also take a lesson from this. We can not only think about grounding the issue of sustainability in higher purposes resonant with what is best in the world's religions or belief systems, but not owned by a single creed. So this is important. And I think we can expand this as well. Just universal values. And again, depending upon our audience, right? So humility, cohesion, not trying to demonize, not trying to point a finger at someone, because that doesn't bring people together. That serves to further polarize. Okay, and the last one here, Lincoln understood the power of language to clarify, motivate, and ennoble. So we as communicators understand persuasion. We understand that we need to analyze our audience. Oh, that sounds so analytical, sorry. We need to understand our audience's worldviews and values. And especially in a complex and sometimes challenging issue such as sustainability, we need to know it even more so that we can use the art of persuasion to the best effect possible. So Orr says that Lincoln spoke, quote, directly, often bluntly, but he softened his words with humor and the adroit use of metaphor and homespun stories. Oh boy, doesn't that make you think of storytelling, narrative, the power of narrative, right? The result was to place the horrors of combat and the bitterness of sectional strife into a larger context that motivated many to make heroic sacrifices and a legacy of thought and words that, quote, remade America. So, sure, that was Lincoln. We can do the same thing. We can persuade with words that encourage, that inspire, stories that help connect, and create a vision for the future. So these are some of the takeaways that I hope you got from the David Orr article, and some of the takeaways that we'll be expanding on later, and hopefully we can use in other contexts later in the course.